Hello everyone, we are starting day 3 of the CodeRefinery workshop September-October 2025. I'm Enrico, I'm at Aalto University, and right now you might already be seeing our instructors of the day, Gregor de Cristoforo. Hello Gregor.
Hello.
And Andrew Mashchak. Did I pronounce it well?
Yes, you did.
Yes. Hello Andrew.
Hello.
But Gregor and Andrew, they are both in the UiT, University of the Arctic of Norway. So up there in Tromsø. They're part of the Research Software Engineering Group, and they work with HPC and this type of stuff. So lots of HPC experts as instructors this year. And you might also see Jarno. Hello, Jarno.
Hello.
Who is controlling the streaming and the broadcasting for today. Right, so a couple of reminders before we actually dive into the best day. Well, I mean, I don't want to say it's not, maybe I don't know if it's the best day, but one of the most amazing days of the CodeRefinery workshop. Today it's day 3, and I'm scrolling down to the schedule for today. And I click on this day 3 intro. And here we are. So for day 1 and 2, it was like an introduction to version control. In day 1, you got all the terms and you managed, even just using the GitHub web interface, to do commits and things like that. For day 2, we kind of moved on the local computer, which is very important because then you already start feeling kind of the power of such tool that you can work locally, and when you're happy, you can push on a remote place, GitHub, GitLab, your server, whatever, and collaborate with other people who can then pull locally what the changes that you did and so on. And today, which is day 3, everything comes together and we show exactly this power of the collaborative distributed version control. So the concepts that are introduced today, they build on top of what has been shown already in day 1 and day 2. And so here, it's not necessary that you do things locally. You can also use the GitHub web interface to do this type of collaboration with others. But I really like, I was saying that this is the best day because what you learn today is something that even can go beyond uh, software engineering or code, because with this tool, with what you will learn today, you can go out and fix typos in documentation of your favorite packages, software packages. You can make a web pages, help other people web pages, and truly, unleash the power of open source development. What else? Some practicalities. I scroll up, I switch window to this notes document, which you should all have received via email in the reminder that I sent a minute ago. If you were not with us in the previous days, so in this notes document on the very top right corner, which now is hidden by our webcams, but it's okay, you should see a pencil.
I can turn it off for a moment. Okay.
Yeah, so you see my mouse is moving there on top of the pencil. When I click the pencil, it will switch to like an edit mode. And here I'm scrolling down, and there's already some questions, and some of our helpers have already answered. And this will be the main interface so that everyone can ask and answer at the same time. You can answer somebody's question, give your comments and feedback, and so on. But I don't wanna steal precious time, so I switch back. I click on the eye, which is also good because then in this rendered mode, it's lighter for the server. So we can get the webcams back, and I think we could switch to, I think Gregor is starting with the screen share, and enjoy day 3 of Collaborative Git CodeRefinery workshop. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Enrico. And welcome from our side. I also consider this day to be the most fun since we kind of build upon what we've learned in the last 2 days, and we now work together with others on the same code base. Expect today to be slightly chaotic because multiple people will now work together on pull requests on code reviews will merge into one GitHub repository. So not everything will work according to plan, but that's fine. That's part of the fun. Enrico already mentioned almost everything in terms of bookkeeping that was to be said. Maybe just a few things on my side that I want to add. First of all, we will have today 3 exercises, and you will have roughly 30 minutes for every exercise. So it's a bit more time than you did have in the last 2 days. So please keep an eye on the Markdown document that Enrico has mentioned, because we need to see there at what stage you are during the exercises. So please let us know whether you're done or not, whether you have any questions. This will be a central part now for us to the way how we communicate to each other. Also, please do remember the code of conduct. So please don't put anything weird into the pull requests or the reviews and so on. But otherwise, I think we are ready to go. As Enrico already mentioned, so I and Andrew, we both work at UIT and the Research Software Engineering Group, and we've both worked as researchers before. So in my case, it was fusion plasma physics. In case of Andrew, you have a background in bioinformatics and computer science, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
So what I'm trying to say is we've been researchers, so we have been in your shoes. We know what kind of struggles and challenges you have in your everyday life when you work with code as a researcher, and hopefully we can help you with most of these topics now today during the seminar. Okay, I think that's all there is to be said before we start with the lecture. So I think we are ready to go ahead. So the first thing we will mention today is just a quick reminder of the concepts that we've discussed in the last 2 days. So that's what is a repository, what is a commit, what is a branch, and so on. You will have time during the exercises to read up on these concepts again if you feel slightly unsure about some of them. You have 30 minutes, so there's plenty of time to read up on old topics and then build up on them. But there is 2 specific things that I want to pinpoint, which we should emphasize now, and that's cloning and forking a repository. So I think that we should start with discussing that in a little bit more detail. And a very easy way to do that is by pointing out this figure, which is shown here. So what you can see here now is a repository, which is here indicated to be on GitHub. So this cloud here refers to like a server, cloud server somewhere. In this case, it's on GitHub. And it contains, this repository here contains multiple branches that you can see here indicated in these different colors. So we have the blue main branch, we have a green experimental branch, we have this red ideas branch. Every branch has multiple commits, so each square here refers to a commit, and we also have a tag here in this case, so when the version 1.0 came out. And then we can either clone or fork this repository, and you will do both things today during the exercises. So what you're already familiar with is cloning, so that means that you copy the whole repository as one piece to your laptop or your workstation, wherever you work locally. So you can see there's then a copy, which then changes here the names of the branches, but otherwise it stays exactly the same. And then there's a second option, which we will work in the third exercise today, and that's forking. And forking means that we copy the repository inside of GitHub. So we copy it from the original place to another one, usually your own GitHub account. So then if this is, for instance, the recipe book from the CodeRefinery repository, you would copy it over to your personal GitHub repository. And it stays exactly the same. So conceptually, it's very much the same, but we will see that in exercise 2 and 3 what the major differences are. Now, maybe one of the first questions that arise then is, when would you actually want to fork and when would you want to clone? So Andrew, may I ask you, what do you usually do in your everyday life when you work with code repositories? In which case do you prefer to clone and when do you fork?
Well, the main thing that decides which you do is generally whether you have write access to the repository. If you do, then you can just clone and push your changes back. In many cases, if you want to work on or modify software that is managed and maintained by someone else at a different university or wherever, it is easier to just make a fork, and then you can work on it and modify it without having to always request that your changes be accepted. And so that's one main reason to fork instead of just cloning.
And often that's the case when you work with repositories which are much bigger and where multiple people are working on it. So if it's just inside of your own organization, if you only have 2 or 3 people working on one repository, then probably cloning is enough. But if you then want to contribute to, let's say, a large project like NumPy, for instance, for those of you who work in Python, they might recognize that immediately. That's one of the most popular libraries. Then you cannot just clone that. You would have to fork it first and then work on the code. So it's also correlated with the size of the repository.
And one other
Okay.
reason that people will fork is if they want to take the particular code base or software in a completely different direction and make changes that they have either couldn't get accepted or have no intention of trying to merge back in with the original project.
Yes, that's also an option. And also always keep in mind what kind of license the repositories use, right? So if the license gives you the right to make changes to it and use it, or if it's a restricted license, that's also something you should keep in mind. We will also learn today how to synchronize the changes between different repositories, or like between fork repositories and clone repositories. In the past, it has been quite cumbersome on GitHub, but they made it really easy now in the UI, so it's just a few mouse clicks. We will go through that later on as well. And we should also mention generating repositories from templates. That's relevant for those of you who are now exercise class leaders. So those of you who will have will clone their repository for your local group. In this case, we can use templates for that. And the difference between a template and a normal repository is simply that a template will flatten the history. So it's like a Git squash, if you remember from the previous days. Basically, all the history from this repository that you cloned has been flattened so that we start with an initial commit and start from a kind of new state. So we don't have all the history from the creation of the template. So for those of you who will work on or who will lead an exercise class, this will be important. Okay, I think we have motivated what we are working on today enough. And I think we can then start with introducing the first exercise. Was there anything I have forgotten, Andrew?
I think that's everything.
Okay, so let's go to the next chapter. And that's now collaborating within the same repository. So imagine you work together with your research group on a package that you develop, which is at the moment only relevant for 2-3 people in your research group. Then you probably would want to start with collaborating inside of one repository. And that's what we will practice now in this first round. In this exercise, you will be asked to create a pull request. So what is a pull request? Maybe we should give like an explanation of that concept, so if you haven't heard that before. The idea is to make some changes to the code base. It could be a new implementation. It could be something completely new. It could also be just a change to existing code or a fix of a mistake of a bug in the code. And you make this change as a proposal. You put it out as a proposal so that other people can look at it, give their opinions, say whether they're happy with the changes or not, and then can be merged. So instead of merging it directly into the main branch, you have like this additional sets of controls that the changes have to go through before you merge them. In this exercise, we will now start with the repository that is outlined here. I'll just quickly give some information about how the team leaders will have to work with this, and then I go to those of you who are not in the team but will work directly with the repository together with us. So if you are part of a team or an exercise room, please go to this repository and fork it. And then you would have to send invitations to all these people who are parts of this group. So I'll just quickly open that in an additional tab. So I'll go to that tab now. So you can here use this template. And if you do that, then I will just now show the exercise that we will work on. You can go to the settings here. Go to collaborators and teams, and then you can invite people. So in this case, let me just make it a little bit larger so that everyone can see. You have different roles, and in this case, it's important. Okay, unfortunately, I have to scroll on to the right. Let me see. This is slightly difficult to see. Let's just go back to the general one. You will have to set it to read. In this case, let's see. So here it is. Sorry. So we go to the team section. Sorry, here down it is. Okay. I'm just not used to having it have such large such a large zoom in the Github repository. Here you have different roles, so it will be important that you set this to write, because by default it might be read, which means that those of you that you invite to participate in this to work on this repository will not have the option to create here to merge these pull requests. So in this case, please set it to write. Also, one thing that we can do, which I want to mention, is if you go to branches, we can set additional rules for these branches. And in this case, I've set up here a rule for the main branch that you have worked with already in the last couple of days in the CodeRefinery workshop. We can here add this additional rule, which says that we require a pull request before merging. And I would recommend doing that for repositories where multiple people work on it, since that means that not just that no one can just change the code in the main branch without anyone else approving the changes. So this is something that you should enable. Otherwise, people might just by accident merge into the main branch, which is not what we want to achieve today. Okay, so let's go back to the material. That was all the information which is important for those of you who manage a group of participants. But for those of you who will work with the centralized repositories, you will work together with us, so with Andrew and also Enrico and Jarno. In this case, you have two different options for this exercise. You have first one that is that we will not share in the stream, and then there is one which we will show. So this is the one that we will show on the stream. If you don't wish that your username will be shown during the stream, you will work on the centralized workflow exercise repository. And if you don't mind, then please choose the recorded one. It would be fun to see a few people join on this one as well, so that we can see a lot of different recipes that will be added. Okay. If you haven't already sent us a request to be added to the repository, please do so now. You find all the instructions here. We will then send you an invitation, and then which you need to accept, and then you can participate in this repository. And also one additional thing, by default, you might have the setting here to all activity, which is not what you want, since that would mean that whenever someone creates a pull request or an issue in this repository, you will be spammed by emails. So set it to participants and mentions. That's a good idea, or you can also set it to ignore, so that you don't get any notifications by email whenever something happens in the repository. Okay, so much about the whole UI stuff in GitHub, but let's go to the lesson itself. So we will work now with this recipe cookbook. So it's basically a collection of different recipes in this repository. Let me open that repository once again. So if you go now to the code, I'm now in this repository that those of you will work with who choose to work individually with us. We are in the centralized workflow exercise recorded repository. And you can see here, we have here multiple directories which all contain different recipes. So if let's go to salads, for instance, and I will just now open a random document, let's say the fruit salad in this case. And you can see we have here this file, which contains an ingredient section and also instructions, which are in this case relatively detailed. Now, we don't ask you to spend that much time on like creating a very sophisticated recipe. It can be something super simple. The idea is just that you contribute or like make a pull request to a new recipe. Now, some of the steps you're already familiar with. So you will have to first clone a repository, then create a branch, then commit the changes to a new branch, and then submit a pull request. So that's what you've done so far already. But then the new concepts here will be how to push to this remote repository, create an issue, cross-reference the issue in the pull request, and then create a pull request. The instructions are here, and then you also find the solutions down here. And checking the solutions is not cheating, so please just have a look at the solutions and follow them in order to contribute. Is there anything else we should mention, or should we just then go into the exercises? Andrew, did I forget anything?
Not that I'm aware. That should be good.
Okay, so in this case, we will then start the exercises. It's now 20 past, so we give you roughly half an hour. So at 10 to 12 in Central European time, whatever that is in your time area. We will then get back to you on the stream and then start the break for 10 minutes. So please use that break, and then we will go for this exercise ourselves. So Andrew will then contribute a new recipe to the repository, and then we will go for the exercise together. Okay. Then I'll leave you to the exercises and see you in half an hour. Bye. Okay, welcome back from the exercises. You can see that there is already a lot of nice contributions to the recipe book, so thank you all for contributing. So we can see here in this repository, the centralized workflow exercises recorded repository. There's a bunch of issues. A lot of them have already been closed as well. There's a lot of pull requests. Many of them have also been already merged. So thank you all for contributing. That looks really good. Before we go into the break in 30 seconds, let me just quickly show you the graph. So we can go here on insights in the repository, and we can go to network. And that gives us a very good overview over the different branches and who's working on what. So we can see here the main branch, and then we see here already some merged branches, this yellow one, for instance, and we have some branches here which are open. So we can see there's a lot of contributions already made. Okay, so let's go into a break for 10 minutes, and afterwards Andrew will create his own pull request, and we will discuss the whole exercise in detail. See you then. Bye. Okay, welcome back, everyone. I see that a lot of you have already submitted very nice recipes. Thank you all for that. And I have seen that there was a couple of questions about these automated tests. So if you look here at the repository again, so I'm here at the centralized workflow exercises recorded one. We can see that some of these recipes have like this green check mark, and some of them have this red X, which we haven't discussed yet. So let's have a look. Let's click on it and see what's happening. So we have here this really nice biryani recipe that has been added. And if we scroll down, okay, it tells us that there have been some checks. We'll discuss them in a minute. And if you look at them, it gives us an error message. Okay. Looks like the instructions are missing. Okay, so what is this this test here? That's something that we'll discuss in more detail later on, and also there will be a whole section about this in a later stage of this workshop, so not today. But just to give you a hint already, so on GitHub we can create additional tests, which are here in this .github workflow directory. So let's click on that. And here we have a file which is called check-recipes.yaml. So let's open that. And this now contains the tests that we run every time you create a pull request and if you push towards the repository. So at the beginning, it gives us a name of this check. In this case, it's just basic recipe check. We can specify which branches we want to run these checks on main, in this case. And then down here, we can then specify on what kind of server this is running. So this is something that GitHub provides. So in this case, we just use a standard Linux server. And then at the very end, this is the relevant part, we run a file, which is called Python check recipes. And if you go back to the repository, you can see that there is this file. Now, if you don't know Python syntax, that's perfectly fine. You don't have to understand what's going on here. So let me just tell you, the only thing that this file does is it checks whether there is an ingredients and an instructions section in the recipe. That's all it does. And then if there is one, it gives a green check. And then if there isn't one, then it gives this red cross. Now, this is, of course, a somehow silly example. Like you would use this later on, for instance, if you have tests written for your code and you want to make sure that every time there's a new contribution to your code, that this doesn't break any of the existing functionalities of your code base. But in this particular case, we can now have a look why this exactly happened. So let's go to the changes. We can click here on file changed. And we see, okay, the problem is that this user outsmarted us. Like the check is really stupid and just checks whether there's a hashtag ingredients and instruction section. What we haven't thought of is that you might use Unicode characters here, which look really nice, but unfortunately our tests have not been prepared for. So one could change that by suggesting to, there's a refresh button. Let's click that. Someone has made changes to it right now. okay, these things have not been changed, but what we could do now is to suggest to make the changes here, to remove this Unicode character here, and then the test would pass. So this was just a quick kind of introduction to tests. We'll discuss it in further detail later on. Okay. I think it's time that we now discuss the whole exercise in further detail. So Andrew, can I give you the mic and you would walk us through the exercise?
Sure. Okay. And I guess we can switch to my screen share. Oh, sorry. Let's unpause that, resume. Okay, there we go. All right, so we working our way through the exercise tasks. We begin with opening an issue. And so let's find a particular issue that we have that needs modifying. So here I'm looking at the guacamole recipe, and I happen to think that it needs some garlic to give it a little more kick. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll create an issue here. And let me just resize this so we can see that. Here's our new issue. And we'll call it guacamole needs more garlic, or it needs garlic. Okay. Guacamole tastes better if it has garlic. So we should include it as an ingredient. Okay, so there's our issue that we can reference. And we'll go ahead and click on create there. All right, now heading back over to the code. So here we're not working locally, so we're going to skip step 2. If you are working locally, then you need to clone using the URL here. And that's covered elsewhere, so I'm not going to go over that right now. But we need to create our new branch that's going to contain our changes. So here we can just type in, and I'm all for descriptive naming. So guacamole, add garlic. Okay, and so we can say create that branch from main. And so there we go. So now we're working in this branch rather than main. You can see that it doesn't say main here. It says guacamole, add garlic. And so now we're going to go ahead and make this modification. If you're working locally, this would be where you would edit the file directly, but we're going to do that in GitHub. So here's the guacamole recipe here, and we can go and edit it. And there's the edit this file. And so we can go down here and add 2 cloves of garlic. And then additionally in the instructions, mince garlic. Okay, so there we go. And we can then go back up here and go to commit changes. And so then in our commit message, add garlic. And we can add an extended description, but I think it's pretty simple. Here we can add garlic as an ingredient and include instruction item. Okay, so we can then commit that. There is also an option. We could have skipped the branch creation previously and just done that right here and given it a new one. And that's fine if you're just doing one change. But in this case, you often may want to have multiple files changed, and so it's easier to use a dedicated branch that you've already created. Okay, so then we'll commit changes. Okay, and so then we can see that that is now added there, and we have the instruction there. Okay, and then going back, we can see that it says now that this branch is one commit ahead. And because of that, we have the option here to contribute our changes back to the main branch. And so let's see, looking at the instructions here, we've created a change on the new branch. Oh, we forgot to commit the cross-reference to the issue. So let's go back and do that real quick. First of all, the issue is number 23. We can see that here. Then let's come back over and go to this commit. Okay. Well, I think we'll just reference that in the pull request. So here we have the option then to create the pull request. As you can see, we can create it from the commit itself, or we also have the option to, if we're in that particular branch, to use the contribute option here. So let's do that. Open pull request. Let's make sure. Yeah, open pull request towards the main branch, step 6. Open pull request. Okay, so here we have the description. This solves the issue number 23, and it automatically knows where that is for us. And then we can do this. Okay, so we now can then create the pull request. Okay. So now it is telling us that we have a review required. And it is also, as we can see right here, that it is performing the basic recipe checks. And since the ingredients heading and the instructions headings were both there properly, then that particular check passes. Gregor, do you want to switch to your share and do the review?
We can. First, what you could do is to assign me as a reviewer. That's something we could show.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Oh. Yes. Now this have this window is very narrow, so that assignment is shows up in the bottom. If we were to actually have a normal sized window, that's going to show up on the right-hand side here. So we can see here reviewers. And so then it makes a suggestion here and we can request that. You can also click here and search for or choose a user that way. So we'll go ahead and click on Gregor there. And so he is now listed as a reviewer and will hopefully approve our changes. So over to you, Gregor.
Okay, thank you. So we'll now wait until I'm sharing the screen again. Okay, here we go. Nice. So I'm now still in the same repository, and I see in the issues, I see that Andrew has created this issue where he says that the guacamole recipe needs more garlic. And, which is quite nice, I can already see that there is a pull request here linked to it. So that's because Andrew has now linked the pull request to this issue number. So that's what shows up already here. So I could now click on that directly. But of course, I could also find the same thing. If I click on pull request here, it will also show up. So I will now open this file. Okay, so let's have a look. So what are the first things you should do when you look at a pull request as a reviewer? So first of all, of course, let's look at the title. Does this seem to make sense? Yeah, that sounds reasonable. That's something we can work on. It's not some kind of spam or something which has no relevance for the project. Now, if you scroll down, what do we see here? We see the initial message that Andrew has written. I can click here to see the commits. So in this case, it's one simple commit. So this would then show me the commit message, which you remember from the previous days. Now, since we have a check, it also shows me whether the checks have passed. In this case, they have. So like everything seems to be fine. And now the most important tab is this one called Files Changed. because that actually shows me the changes in the code. So I will click on that now. Okay. So in this tab, it shows me which documents or which files have been changed in this pull request. In this case, it's only one. It's in the sites directory and it's the guacamole.md, so that this markdown document. If this pull request would contain multiple files that have contained changes, then they would be listed down here. So we could scroll down and then multiple files would be listed here. In this case, there is only 2 lines which are added. So if this pull request would delete some lines or rename them, then they would also appear as red. So you've probably already seen it if you have reviewed some other pull requests, otherwise you will see probably later. So if like Andrew would have said, okay, I don't want any onions in my recipe, then this would have been shown as missing now in this pull request. Okay, so what shall we do now as a reviewer? First of all, we have a look whether the changes in the code make any sense. So in this case, we see that the only changes that happened is that 2 cloves of garlic have been added. And in the instructions, we see that the garlic needs to be minced. So that's very simple. There's not many things going on here. So in this case, I can then click on review. And since it's just very small changes, I will just approve them right away and write a nice message. Something like that. And I can submit a review and say that I approve this pull request. Now, I think it's always very important to be very polite, since in this case, it didn't take Andrew a lot of time to make this change. But let's assume this is now a very large code base, and Andrew has spent weeks on working on a specific feature that he contributed to this project. And if he then kind of submits, like after weeks of work, his pull request, and then the only feedback you get from a reviewer is like, here's a spelling mistake, and here is like something which is not really relevant, then this is can be quite discouraging. So I think it's always very important that the first time an external person collaborates with a new project, that he gets welcomed and gets a good impression. Because otherwise, if he would be now very nitpicky and mean, then Andrew would probably think twice whether he would want to contribute to that project again. Okay. And in this case, I think everything seems fine. So we can go ahead and merge the pull request. And guess what this merge is? It's another commit, right? So we can here create a commit message. In this case, it already has this proposal here, which is simply merge pull request number 24 from this branch into the main branch. So in this case, now we click on confirm merge. And now what I can do is to delete the branch. And that is safe to do, because now the changes from this particular branch are already in the main branch. So all the checks have been stored. So I can now delete this one. It's often good practice to delete unused branches, stale branches, so that you keep a good overview. If you would now go to the code and have a look here at the history of our repository, then we see here that the latest commit now refers to the merge pull request. One thing we haven't mentioned yet are draft pull requests. Andrew, do you quickly want to mention them, since that was one point of the exercise?
Sure. Certainly, there are times when it's important that you keep your collaborators informed of your progress, that they can review it, and catch if you're heading off in the wrong direction as far as the approach that you're taking, or if you need feedback on what you've done so far. It can be useful to have draft pull requests that are works in progress, so that you can get that feedback, and people can look and see what you have so far, and that can be very useful. And the other issue is that, of course, it's important not to commit half working code into your tree, obviously.
Yeah, it's always important to communicate with the maintainers and the other people in the project, because the last thing you want to do is to write 5,000 lines of code and then realize that no one else is interested, or no one else actually wants that feature or has a different plan. So if the reviewer says, okay, I want this repository to go in a different direction, I'm not interested in your particular implementation, then it's much better to ask in advance instead of like working on it without telling anyone else. Also, by communicating that way, you make sure that no one else is duplicating your work. So like you save time as a whole group.
Yeah,
Please,
that's sorry. That's also why we started out this with the creation of an issue, so that if even before you begin writing your 5,000 lines of code, you can get feedback and not merely opening an issue to say this is a problem and then going off and working to solve it, but opening it up and including a statement that you're planning on approaching the solution in a particular way so you can get feedback as soon as possible.
Exactly, yeah. Andrew, what do you think? How large should pull requests be on average?
They can be, any size. They should be, they should be cohesive. One unit. You don't want to make a set of changes that make changes in 3 different places in the file and commit those all 3 separately if they don't actually function collectively as a unit. For larger code base, yeah. The ideally your commits should always leave the branch or in working state. It's not always possible, but it certainly is an ideal that you should strive for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you should have, the better thing is to have many small pull requests if that's possible. Of course, sometimes it's just impossible if you have a very large change that needs to be done to the code base, but in principle, it's always better to have many small ones since it's less work for the reviewer to go through 50 or 100 lines of code and understand still what's going on than going through a major rewrite of the whole code base. Also, as you said, we should always keep the pull requests cohesive in a sense that like it's one particular feature, and then it doesn't matter whether it's spread over 3 or 4 different files or whether it's just one. That's much better to have like one coherent feature in one pull request than having like 3 completely unrelated things in one pull request. So it's better to keep it that way so that you have that you also make it easier for the reviewer what's going on. Like if there are 2 completely separate things from each other in a pull request, then that can it's not good practice. There were a few other things that I wanted to mention about good practice for pull requests. And one thing we've already seen are these automated tests. So what you should focus on as a reviewer is doing things that humans are good at and not things that can be easily automated. So if you, for instance, have a particular way how you want the code style to look like, then you can use something called linters, which is a tool that checks whether the code formatting is the way you want it to. This will be mentioned in further detail at a later stage, but I'm mentioning this in order to pinpoint like you as a code reviewer should really focus on the things that only you as a human could do that no automation tool can do for you. You should also probably merge as soon as possible since you want the other collaborators, so everyone in your team have access to the latest changes. So you don't want to keep that away from everyone for a few months and then only merge it once it's 100% perfect. Like things are never fully perfect. So it's better to merge as soon as possible so that like everyone can benefit from the changes that you make. And also it doesn't really matter whether the review is done by someone who is more experienced or not, because code review is not just there to make sure that the changes that you do don't screw up anything in the code. They're also there to communicate. So if Andrew now, for instance, as a very senior engineer has a brilliant idea what to implement, then he can create a pull request, and me, let's say I'm a junior member of the team, I'm not as experienced yet, I still would learn a lot from doing the code review, since that's a very easy or very good way of transferring information and transferring knowledge. Also, the perspective of someone who is not as experienced can also be very important, since one quality of code, it's not just what it works well, but I mean, of course, it should do what it's supposed to do. It should be hopefully performant and so on. But readability is also a major criteria for good code. So if I, as someone who, let's say, is new to this programming language that I was using, I'm completely unable to understand what's happening, then maybe that's, on one hand, a sign that I'm not particularly experienced and I should learn more. But it could also be a sign that maybe the code is written in such a way that it's very overcomplicated, and it could be written in an easier way, which is then better for everyone who works with the code and also for new users. So the perspective of like a diverse team of different people with different levels of experience can be very valuable. So there's no reason to assume that code reviews can only be done by senior people who are very experienced. Is there anything else, Andrew, that we should mention before we go back to the material?
I think that's most of it.
Okay. So in that case, let's go now to the next section. So I'm here the material of the lesson. So I just scroll to the bottom. We have discussed protected branches already. And then we have here a quick summary. Let's just quickly have a look whether there are any questions in the Markdown document that we could answer now, which are still connected to this topic. Let's see. I'm scrolling here to the end of this document. I see that there are already a lot of answers there. Any recommendations of using Copilot? Okay, that's a good question. Andrew, do you want to share your thoughts on this?
I will pass to you.
Okay. So personally, that's not my personal opinion, right? So take that with a pinch of salt. I think it can be very useful to use Copilot if you're familiar with if you can decipher what the code that Copilot spits out does. So if you're already experienced in your programming language and you can understand everything that Copilot does, then I think it's a very great, it's a great tool that can make you much more productive. However, you should always remember that you still have the responsibility for the code. Like Copilot doesn't take this responsibility away. So if you are unsure whether what Copilot does makes sense, then that's maybe a sign that you shouldn't fully rely on it. But you should always check yourself whether the changes that Copilot suggests make sense. I mean, that's the case for any AI tool, really. So I would encourage you to use it, but always like don't become too complacent. Always try to always understand what Copilot does, whether that makes any sense for your code base.
Yeah, and
but I think yeah.
I was just going to say it's very important to understand the code, that not rely on does it give me an error when I run it. If it doesn't give me an error, that doesn't mean the code is correct. So that's you have to be very careful about, particularly with more extensive amounts of code being provided. It's very critical because particularly if you're working with anything that has the potential for resulting in erroneous results or potential for security implications, those are all things where it's particularly important to be very careful in reviewing AI generated code.
Okay. Yes, so someone has posted a probably very good resource that you can read up on. Let's see, there's another question. In the exercise, we created a branch. Does modifying a file work the same way for pull requests? Yeah, so if you remember from the lecture, pull requests, they are always from one branch to another branch. So if you would contribute directly to, let's say, like if you push something directly from your main branch locally to the main branch on GitHub, or if you just change something directly on GitHub, it is not a pull request. Pull requests always work from one branch to another branch. So let's see, does that answer the question? Does modifying a file work the same way for pull requests? Yeah, so if you then change the file in one pull request, then, in one branch that is connected by a pull request, then it will update the pull request automatically. So that's maybe something we haven't explicitly mentioned, but how would we deal with a situation where we are unhappy with some changes, right? So I'll open the repository again. And I will now use again this adding biryani recipe. We can see here that's a pull request from Bergen to main. And we saw that particular pull request had the issue that the tests failed because there was this Unicode character which our automated tests didn't catch or were unprepared for. So what we did here was to change the file in this branch. I suggested here, let's show the change. What I suggested here is to remove this character so that we have ingredients here written only like that without any Unicode character. And this was then committed. So we see here I made a commit, which is, can I have a look at this commit? So I changed here this line. I removed just this character. And this now updated the branch. And by updating the branch, which is connected by a pull request, it automatically updated the pull request as well. And then the tests were run again. And in this case, they passed. So in theory, now we see that all checks have passed. And we see that someone had, okay, we actually didn't do a formal review. So let's do it quickly. Let's go up. And it already has this pop-up here asking me to do a review. So I'm going to click on it. Okay. I'll have one last look. Okay, that looks all good. Ah, okay. So I can give some additional comments if I want. I can say, let me make sure I don't make any spelling mistakes. Let's start to review. Okay. Let's see, is there anything else that needs special attention? It looks all good. Even tips. That's very helpful. Quickly, review comment. Okay. Okay. So let's go up and we can finish your review. We can click on it and I can approve it now. So I'm going to now submit the review. And we can merge it. Okay, let's see. Are there any other questions in the document? Yeah, I hope that this question is answered, number 20. So let's go back to the material. I'll just bring it up again. We now go to the next page and we now start with the next exercise. So this will be the last thing we do before we go into the lunch break. We will now basically focus on the code review process. So a lot of it is repetition. Just the focus this time is now on the creating the pull request and suggesting changes to it. So we've already shown most of these steps here during the stream, but I will ask you now to create additional, let's see how many pull requests we have. If we don't have enough, we might need to make a few more pull requests. Let me just take this down. No, sorry, how do I? Okay, let's go to the number of issues and pull requests. Okay, so for this exercise, we'll ask you to create a pull request again, and now then go through the review process here, which is mentioned. So I just screwed up my screen share a little bit. Let's open the other window. Okay. Okay, so what you need to do is described here in exercise number 2. As I said, focus on the review button, on the review function, use this plus or minus button to suggest changes. And otherwise, I think it's mainly the same thing. So now you can practice doing code reviews. And I think we give you a roughly 25 minutes. So we would then finish at Central European time. That would be 12:58. I will then just quickly say a few words before we then go into the lunch break. So with that said, good luck with the exercise and see you in 25 minutes. Bye. Okay, welcome back from exercise number 2. We are almost at the lunch break, but let me just use the remaining time to quickly discuss one question which appeared here in the collaborative document. And that is here, one participant has a hard time to find the plus and minus symbol. So let me quickly show where you can find that when creating a pull request or doing a review. So I'm now again at the same repository as before. And now let me just pick one of the pull requests here. I'll go again to files changed to see what the code actually looks like that has been changed. And now, in this case, I can click on this blue plus sign. And let's see. That's interesting. It doesn't show it to me right now. That is strange. Let me try a different one. That should not be the case. That's changed. I click on the sign. And here it is. Actually, I don't know why it didn't show previously. Does anyone else know who's in the call? I guess that's a no. But what we mean is this add a suggestion tab. So I click on it. And now it displays this one line under here suggestions. So if I make changes here, let's say, okay, what is that actually? That's 500,000 avocados, might be slightly too many. So let's reduce it to 50,000. I believe that's enough. And then I can do add a single comment. So now if I go to conversation, I scroll down, and now it suggests a change, but also it does it twice for some reason. I guess I misclicked. But if I now click to commit suggestion, I can make this commit automatically. So now I create an additional commit without the person having to actually do it themselves. So that way we can suggest changes to the code automatically as a reviewer, and we can also merge it if the person who creates the pull request enables that, which is done by default. So this makes it much faster to suggest changes to the code than doing it back and forth. Yeah, you telling the person who created the pull request what to do, then the person has to do it. You can just create it right away with this plus minus sign. I am a bit surprised that I didn't see it the first time I clicked on it. So I'm not entirely sure whether that's because I'm zoomed in so far again. Andrew, have you encountered this before? I don't remember ever not seeing this. Okay. So this is strange, but thank you for noticing. I'll try another one just to see whether this is a recurring theme. So we see here, a different pull request. I click on files changed. 500 grams of chicken. Okay, let's say we want to make a change here, and I say we want to have 700 grams. Add a single comment. And now it appears here. So I can commit it directly here if I want to create a commit where I add these changes to the pull request. Or I can also do it here in conversation then. It appears in both places. And here I can then commit if I want. But I leave that now for the person who created the pull request. I hope that answers the question. There are some other questions. Yes, so pull requests, this feature is also available on GitLab. So for those of you who are not familiar with GitLab, GitLab is basically an alternative platform to GitHub. It is not owned by Microsoft, but you can host your own GitLab instance if you want. So it's a kind of a free version. But some of the functionalities that GitHub provides are not automatically enabled in GitLab. But you can think of it just as a different option instead of GitHub. The strange or funny thing is that GitLab calls pull requests merge requests, but they're exactly the same thing. They just have a different name. So all the concepts that you've learned today and the last 2 days, they're also applicable if you use a slightly different stack in the future. So like there's maybe the names change, but in principle, it's the same idea. Okay, I see we are 2 minutes over time. So let's go into the lunch break. So here in Central Europe, that would be from right now until 2 o'clock, so 14:00. If you are in other parts of Europe or somewhere else in the world, then you can, I guess, easily calculate when we are back. So we're back in 57 minutes. And we will then go through the last part of the material today, where we then go through the third exercise. We will focus on creating pull requests from forked repositories. So have a nice lunch break and see you then in 57 minutes. Bye. Okay, welcome back everyone. I hope you have a nice lunch break. We are now in the last section of today's workshop. So we will now discuss how to work with repositories where you don't have access to them or write access to them, but we will now show how you can work with them. You can even contribute to them even if you're not part of the original organization that created the repository. You can be a complete outsider and still create pull requests, and we'll show you how to do that now. Before we go to the last bit, however, let me just quickly kind of show at what stage we have now the repository from the previous exercise. So you can see there have been a lot of new issues and pull requests, which is really nice. You can have a look here at the history. You can see all the last commits, and we can see there's a bunch of new pull requests that have been merged. So thank you all for doing that. And one thing which is quite interesting, we can go here to the settings, or like here on these three dots, and then click on Insights. And then if you click on Network, it shows us all the different branches that people have been working on and that have been merged. So here, you can scroll back to the beginning. So here, September 9th, and I originally created this repository based on the templates that was shown earlier. We can now see all the different branches that have been created, and we can see that many of them have been merged. So here, for instance, this is a merged pull request from this user, and you can see here some of them that have not been merged, they're still open. And this gives us a really good overview. So if you have a very complex structure of a repository, then you can always use these network graphs in order to get a better overview of how many branches there are at the moment, how many people are working on it, and so on. And we already see here a new owner, so that's kind of a hint to the exercise we do now. And that's now to fork repositories and create pull requests from fork repositories to the upstream repository. So let us go back to the lecture material. So we are now back here, and we are now in the last section. So this is the how to contribute changes to repositories that belong to other users. So let's open that. Okay. So we will now introduce the third exercise, and then Andrew will basically show the most important steps before we then let you do these the exercise again. So as I already hinted, we are now in a situation where we want to contribute changes to a repository that belongs to someone else. It doesn't have to be someone we know. It could be also like a large repository from a different organization. So let's use NumPy again as an example. So let's say you have found a bug in NumPy, and you also happen to know how to fix it. So again, NumPy is this very famous Python library that probably many of you use. Then you wouldn't be in the NumPy core team, most likely. I would be very surprised if core team members would take this course. So probably what you would have to do in order to make contributions is to fork the repository and then create a pull request from there. So before we start with the exercise, just quickly some bookkeeping again. We will now use a different repository. So we will start with the same template. And if you are now a group leader who is working with like a small group of participants of this course locally, you can generate a new template. And the difference to the previous case is that you now do not have to add any collaborators, because now people will fork it and will contribute that way. So there's less to do for the people who work in these groups. And if you want to work together with us, then it's a similar story again. We have two new repositories, so we don't use the same ones as we did before. And again, there are two repositories, because one will be the recorded one, and the other one is the one which is not recorded. And during the stream, we will now again focus on the recorded one. So if you don't want that username appears on the stream, which then later on might be then published to YouTube and so on, please use the first one. If you don't mind, please use the second one, because if you can show during the live stream that many people use this repository, then I think it's a benefit. Okay, so if you look at the exercise itself, a lot of it will be very familiar. So you will be very familiar with a lot of the steps here. There are just a few small changes, and the first one is that we will now fork the repository and then create a pull request from the fork repository to the upstream repository. And during that, we will then also learn how to synchronize their repositories, and also, again, mention the issues in the original repository so that they are connected. And also then we will talk a little bit more about the tests that you've already encountered. So we didn't expect that you would, that so many of you would encounter the tests in the first exercise. So we'll probably do it a little bit faster than we intended to, but we will still mention it. So if you have any questions about that, then just let us know and we can go through that. Again, the solutions are down here. So if you have any, if you're unsure about something, then just have a look here further down in this document. This is not cheating. This is just reading up on how to do things. But we will also present it fast, since I guess everyone's coming back from lunch break, and maybe to give you a slower start, we will quickly show the most important steps first. Before I give the microphone to Andrew, let me just quickly see whether there were any new questions in the collaborative document. Let's see. Is there an echo? Okay. I hope that's just you. If I ask some of my code teachers, do you encounter that? I hope not. Well, I take that as a no. How to fork with command line. Okay. Yeah, so that's a good question. Forking is not done on the command line, since it's a mechanism or it's a feature that is done inside of GitHub or GitLab, so, or whatever platform you use. So if you go, maybe we can go quickly back to the first lecture. Sorry, that was not what I intended. I wanted to show this one. And you remember this figure here? You see we have this repository, and then cloning would be down to your laptop. So then that would mean that you copy the whole repository down to your machine. But forking is inside of the cloud, so inside of GitHub in this case. So we just copy the repository from the organization that is in to your private one. I can maybe quickly demonstrate that. So if I now go to the organization, and let's now take the forked one. So we see here centralized workflow exercise recorded. And now I see already 2 people forked it, but I want to fork it myself. And this is done with this button here. Now, if I wouldn't have to zoom in as closely as I am right now for the stream, then it would actually also tell me fork, so it's easier to find. But now I will click on it, and then it will show me the organization in which it will be stored. So in this case, it's my private one, but I can also choose other ones. So you can see here all the organizations that I'm part of. But in this case, I will just choose my private one. And then here, the name I can also change, but I can also keep it the same. And then I can choose whether I only want to copy the main branch or all of the branches that are existing. And then I can create a fork by clicking on this. And that will take a little bit of time. And it's now forking the repository into my own GitHub account. So now if you have a look here, unfortunately, yeah, so if I prolong this a little bit, maybe it's showing it properly. Let's see here. Then you can see now it is in my personal GitHub organization. Okay, but so that was forking. Andrew, may I ask you to then go through the exercise, and we will, go through the exercise here of the third part of the lecture today.
Okay.
So may I give the screenshot to you?
Yep. And waiting for it to switch. Oh, sorry. There we go. All right. So looking at this, we're going to, what's going to be new in this thing? Well, first of all, we're going to fork the repository, create a branch, making a change, and of course, making pull requests. And there, of course, are going to be, but in this case, doing the forking and getting pull requests back to the main or the official repository. So we'll go up here and take a look at that. So here is the official forking workflow exercise repository here. And as Gregor showed, we're just going to click here to fork that. And I'm going to call it recipe book. Okay. Oh, I already have one forked. Okay. And we're just going to copy the main branch because I don't need to modify all of those and have all those other ones. So we'll create that fork. Oh, I sort of skipped over. Yeah, well, so then that prepares us for number 1. So going back to the exercises here. Let's go ahead and create an issue. Now, just to see what issues might exist here, I'm going to go look in desserts. Or let's see. Sure, desserts works. Pumpkin pie. And we have these nice ingredients here and instructions. And perhaps I want to make this to have some optional ingredients, such as marshmallows on top, or chocolate chips or something, to make it a more interesting pumpkin pie. So let's open an issue to do that. So new issue, add optional ingredients to pumpkin pie. We need some additional ingredients to, ingredients to make the pie more interesting. Okay, so we'll go ahead and create that. Okay, so this issue exists and we're going to be able to refer to it going forward. So now coming over here, this is our fork of my own local repository here of that. And it says here forked from, so it knows where the original came from. And so then step 2 is going to be, of course, to create a branch. So we can create a branch, better pumpkin pie. And we'll create that branch. Okay, so then we have.
Could you maybe mention?
Yes.
And sorry to interrupt. Could you maybe mention why it's a good idea to still create a new branch? Because we are in a different repository now. Can't we just use the main branch?
Well, we may want to have multiple changes, and we don't want to have those all intermingled. Also, if this is under review and we come and add more changes, then those changes are included because we pull branch to branch. So we don't want to get things all combined. So it's best to have, compartmentalization, keep a separate branch for each separate set of modifications that you're making.
Yes.
Okay. So we have better pumpkin pie here, and now let's actually go and make that happen. Desserts, pumpkin pie. And so I want some optional ingredients. Chocolate chips or marshmallows. Okay, and we can throw in, yeah, okay. So there they are. We'll put in an instruction, add marshmallows on top if included. And now this is optional ingredients, and then we're going to put this and call it required ingredients so that we can make use of that in a future discussion. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and commit changes there. And I'm going to go ahead and commit this directly to my own branch because I'm doing it. But I do like better commit messages. Add optional ingredients. Okay, so that's been committed. All right, so now if we go back to files here, oh, not files, go back to the main code location. Okay, so we now have this, and you'll see here that we have this indication where it says this branch is now one commit ahead of the repository it was forked from. And so we then have an option to contribute this particular branch that we've constructed back to the original repository. So let's look, just looking briefly at our list of steps. We want to then, of course, make a pull request. So we can do that here. Open pull request. And this is, well, sure, add optional ingredients to pumpkin pie. And here, if we look back at our original, this was issue number 4. We need more ingredients in pumpkin pie recipe. Okay.
Maybe highlights the branch names.
Yes.
Because that's the difference to previously.
This addresses issue number 4, and there is the issue that we're addressing. Okay, so here we forked from a branch called main here, but in our repository we're have this fork. The branch is called Better Pumpkin Pie, and so that's we're committing it back into there. In a different repository, which we can see the difference there. Is that, did you want additional comment? Okay.
Yeah, so you can see here the base repository and the head repository is different. That is to make sure that we are forking into the original one and not accidentally into our own main branch.
Yeah. So we wouldn't want it to be this because that wouldn't be much of a change. Of course, now having done that, it just goes away. So let's do that again. Okay, contribute. Whoop. Oh yes, okay. Let's go to our Better Pumpkin Pie. There we are. Okay, now it's one commit ahead. We can contribute. Open the pull request. Okay. Add more ingredients to pumpkin pie. This fixes issue number 4. Okay. And so then we create that pull request. And allow edits and maintainers. And for now, we're going to just do this like that. Okay. And that creates our pull request, and it heads off to now you can see that this is in the exercises account under the original repository, and it's now listed here in the pull requests. Okay, Gregor, you want to now review that?
Sure, let's do that together. So I'm going to wait until the screen share is on my side again. Okay, no, it's not right yet.
Yeah, that's yours.
Here you go. Okay. Okay. Yeah, so we are back in the repository. So we see here now the issue that Andrew has created. Okay. Okay. We need some additional ingredients to make this pie more interesting. Sounds good. And again, since Andrew mentioned the issue in this pull request, it is already shown here that we have this pull request which is addressing this issue. Let's click on it. Okay, so same as before, we can check now the name. That seems to make sense. We also see here from where to where the pull request is supposed to take place. So we see here from Andrew's forked repository into the main repository, main branch of the CodeRefinery repository. So that's what we want to have. So let's look here further down and we see, okay, these tests, they seem to fail. So that's maybe something we should address. But before that, let's have a look at the files itself. Okay. So we see here there are 3 changes to this file. We have optional ingredients. So again, can comment. No ingredients. So Start to review. Let's see. Okay, we add this. This looks also good. And then here, okay, I might spot what the problem is. Problem is that our test script requires there to be an ingredient section and not required ingredients. So this is now something that I can suggest to change. And this time I will use this plus and minus sign again. So I'll now make some suggestions. So I'll suggest to remove this required and add that as a review comment. Okay. So now I can finish up the review. So I can choose between just commenting, I can approve it, or I can request changes. And since there is this one change that I suggested, I could use that. But I mean, in this case, it's such a small one that I might just do it myself. Right, so I will approve this pull request. Let's click on Submit Review. Let's go to here the overview of the pull request. So we see here the comment that I made, and then we also see here the suggestions that I made. So I can now click on Commit Suggestions, and I can basically create a new commit with the suggestions that I made earlier. So let's just maybe use a more meaningful commit message than this. Let's say fix subtitle, or what is this title or section title to make it compatible with tests. Hopefully that's clear enough. And if I do this again, let's see what the tests are passing this time. So we see that they're running. So we can click on this and it will show us the details. So we see here the different steps in this test. So that's setting up the job. It's then setting up Python, installing PyTest, which is the library that we use for doing these tests. And then we see, okay, everything seems to work. Nice. The checks are green. It's ready to be merged. So let's go back to the pull request. So I have to go back to, sorry, not from actions, I have to click on pull request, of course, go to this pull request, and now it can be merged. So now I can merge it. Okay. Andrew, do you want to show how it looks now on your end in the fork repository?
Sure.
So I give the screenshot back to you. Maybe just one thing. I just show you the history. So the last thing in the history of the main repository now is I can see here that I merged this pull request. Okay, but now there's the next step in the exercise, Andrew, which you have to do on your side, synchronizing the two repositories.
Yeah. Okay, so as it says here, after a few pull requests are merged, update your fork with changes. So let's see what that's all about. So here we are at main here in my own repository. There's my account. This is the repository that I named it, and this is where it's from. And we have this little information here. This branch is 3 commits behind this particular, I mean, the original branch, the original, repository and branch. And so then we have the option to update this branch and pull the changes from it into our local fork of the repository. So we can click there and then click Update Branch. And in they come, and now it's it all is there. And so we have here the commits there. We have the additional optional, fix the section title, and the merge of the request. So that has it there. And if we wanted to just see what that looks like, we can go to the the forks, which was
Forks, yes.
right. I think maybe
Sorry, network. Network was the one that you.
Yes. And I'm just going to move this. And so there we can see how we have this fork and that we've merged it back into our main repository. So there it is.
So this is something you have to do on your yourself. because synchronization between fork repositories does not happen automatically. It's easy to do, to update it, as you have just seen now, but you should keep in mind that this is not something that is done automatically. So if you want to make sure that you are not working on an outdated one, regularly check whether you can synchronize it. Okay, I think we have now 25 minutes planned again. So I will share my screen again. Okay, so if you go down here, we have 25 minutes. So that would mean that the exercise will end by 10 to the full hour. And then we have a 10-minute break. So in 25 minutes, I will just quickly announce that the break will start. And then in 35 minutes, we are back to discuss any remaining questions and wrap up what we've learned today. So having said that, good luck with the last exercise and see you in 25 minutes. Bye. Okay, we're back online. Welcome back. I see that a lot of pull requests have already been created and merged. Thank you for that. There was one question which I quickly wanted to address, since I think this is not something we have mentioned and can be quite confusing, and that's this question here. How do you create a folder on GitHub? So let me just go to one of the repositories. This is maybe a bit counterintuitive, but in GitHub, Git doesn't track any folders, only files. So, but you can trick it into creating folders by creating a file inside of that folder. So I just quickly want to show how to do that. If you're in your GitHub repository like this one, you can click here on plus and then create new file. And then you can choose the file name here. And by making a directory, we can do that by choosing the directory name, let's say fish with this. And then we do slash. And now we've created a directory, and now we create a file inside of that directory. So we can have, I don't know, let's see, I don't know, fried salmon, something. So if I do it like this, and I commit the changes, which I now do, by the way, in my own repository, right? So I'm not screwing up the central one. If I commit this, Copilot is thinking of a nice commit message. Yeah, okay, I'm happy with that. If I now go to the code, and now I see there is an additional directory, and inside of this directory, I have now the file that I created. So this might not be really intuitive. At least I run into this problem also myself a few times, where I was confused about not being able to add directories. So hopefully this answers the question. Let's see whether there are any other questions. Yeah, so should you make a draft pull request or a pull request? This is something we addressed earlier, but I think it's good to repeat it. So you would create a draft pull request if you have some changes that are not done yet, but that you want to get feedback on. So you can already show other people, look, this is what I'm working on. This is the structure of the code that I envisioned. These are the topics that I want to tackle. And then you can already get feedback before you actually have to implement every single bit. But if you have already a clear idea of what you want to do and you already have everything written out, then you would write a normal pull request, because then it can be batched. Okay. We said that we would have a 10-minute break now, so that would be the last break. So we have it now. It's 14:52 in Central Europe. So let's say we meet at 2 past the full hour for the last Q&A session, and to wrap up what we've learned today and give you an outlook on the lectures that will follow up in the next couple of weeks in the CodeRefinery seminar. So with that said, see you all at 2 past. Okay, welcome back everyone to the last part of today's seminar, of today's lectures. I see there were actually quite a few good questions here in the document. Most of them are already answered, but the last one I would like to discuss here on stream as well. So the question is, when we have modified our own fork, and in the meantime, the original repository has moved on, how do we deal with these situations? Like, when do we sync, and how do we make sure that, or what is the best approach in this situation? So this is hinting one concept which we have not discussed today, but yesterday, and that's merge conflicts. So if the changes that you have made and the changes which have happened on the upstream repository, if they don't address the same files or the same lines in the same file, then this is not a problem really. But of course, you can run into merge conflicts. So let's say like you are working on changing a recipe. Let's say this baked salmon recipe that I made previously, like in the instructions, I added a certain tool, and then in the meantime, someone else has done something similar, and the other one has been merged, and there would be a merge conflict, which then needs to be resolved. And then you need actually one person during the review then deciding which commits to, or like which change to actually then commit to the branch. So merge conflicts can still occur even if you use pull requests and if you work between different repositories. That's not something you can magically escape from. So I think, yeah, so thank you very much for this question. I think it kind of pinpointed, or like it's good that you asked, because it reminded me of mentioning pull merge conflicts once again. In general, I would try to always sync the branch that I work on as frequently as possible with the upstream branch to make sure that they don't diverge too far. Because if you get kind of, if you end up working with an outdated version of the code, then your changes are probably not going to be very welcome in the original repository. Okay. So let's wrap up. Let's go to the kind of summary section of the lecture material. So we've learned now how we can approach other people's repositories. And we have here this nice summary, which tells you what to do, depending on the size of the project or the changes that you want to propose. So if it's just a very small one, then the go-to suggestion would be to fork or clone the repository, create a new branch, push your changes to the repository, and then create a pull request. If you work on a larger system, or sorry, a larger project, or with more people, or with someone that you don't know as well, let's say you want to reach out to the maintainers of a Python library, or it could be Julia library, whatever, you might want to actually discuss it first via an issue or a draft pull request, whether what you intend to do makes sense to them, and whether that's something, or whether that's a direction they want the project to go in. So in this case, you will also create an issue first, where you describe the problem. So always over describe, how would you say, like over explain what the issue is. Like you're not talking to people in person, you're doing everything by text. So you be very specific and be very concrete. And then in the best case, like wait for feedback before you start writing 5,000 lines of code to make sure that your contributions are actually welcomed by the contributors, or by the maintainers of the project. And then if you have received feedback, and if they give the green light to go on and work on this project, then you can put in the hours and actually write the code that you want to contribute. And also by creating this issue, you also indicate that this is something that you work on to make sure that not other people have find out the same problem, and then you have 3-4 people working on fixing the same issue if only one would be required. Okay. Yeah, similar story for if you have an idea for a new feature in a code base and you want to suggest that. Let's see. I mean, we've already spoken about all these things. So in principle, we are done with most of, or basically with all of the lectures from today. Let me just quickly see in the document if there are any questions that came up. No, there's a longer answer. If there are no questions, then I think we can wrap up the lecture for today. And in which case I will then give the word to Enrico to give an outline on the upcoming lectures of the CodeRefinery workshop now. But before I do that, I just want to thank everyone who's involved. Like, you only see people in front of the camera, so that's me and Andrew and Enrico. So thank you all for volunteering to work on this. Like, it's always a pleasure to work with you. But there are also many more people behind the camera which have not been directly seen, which I also want to thank. So Jarno, Richard, Samantha, and all the others who have worked on this. Like, this CodeRefinery wouldn't work if there wouldn't be that many people putting in so much effort and volunteer to work on this. So thank you all for doing that, and also thank you for coming to the course. And I hope that the concepts that you've learned today will help you in your future academic careers and make your life and your everyday life as a researcher easier. So with that said, Enrico, may I give the word to you?
Thank you so much, Gregor and Andrew. I hope all the participants felt how important this day was and how fun it is to collaborate with other people and or improve somebody else's repository. So if you, and we could also switch here to the notes document so that we can see it. At the bottom of the notes document, you can keep on asking questions, of course. That's the feedback for today. And the news box is, of course, the interesting one. Today we covered everything as is in the schedule. And please feel free to continue to explore the GitHub interface. This is actually a great opportunity because, you know, even if you do mistakes, even if you, I don't know, break one of these exercise repositories, that's the purpose of it. So you can play with the buttons and any other features that we did not have time to cover. For next week, for the part 2 of CodeRefinery, so back until last year or until last springtime, we used to have it again as a second week. But now, from the feedback from previous year, we decided to change it a little bit. And instead of having a second week and that's it, we're gonna have single episodes every Wednesday for the next 6 weeks. There will be shorter episodes of 2.5 hours each, and they will still cover the usual CodeRefinery workshop materials. But the idea here is more that they are self-contained episodes, so that if there's something that is truly interesting, you can also share it with your colleagues who maybe are happy just to join for that workshop. Let's say that you're planning to write documentation together and you want all your colleagues to watch the documentation episode and so on. So feel free to browse the topics for the future days. The next one will be next Wednesday at 12 o'clock, Oslo, Stockholm, Rome time zone. And that's the main workshop about reproducibility. And we will cover everything from the reproducibility crisis to data management, how to organize folders, and also considering the whole computer, because sometimes when you change computer, things are not reproducible anymore. And so we will introduce concepts like containers and environments and things like that. Right, so we're actually a little bit early, meaning that we will still have a few minutes. So if there's questions, please, you can keep on sending them. Maybe I can ask a question to our instructors here. Do you often contribute to other people that you don't know? Do you contribute to their repositories, like with pull request, with the techniques that you've shown today, Gregor?
Not frequently, but I have I've created some pull requests to the documentation of some programming languages and so on. So some smaller fixes here and there, but I saw that there was a small typo or something which clearly was wrong.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
once I've contributed to a larger project.
Which project was that? Was it some library
Plasma
or?
Pi. So
Okay.
in plasma physics, that is the biggest Python package that, as far as I know, exists. And I contributed some of the routines during my postdoc that we developed in our research group, so that more people than just our research group have access to it.
Yes, yes. Yeah, definitely fixing typos and small things. It's something that now all of you who are watching can actually immediately start doing. I've been also doing that, and in the end, it's you might read a nice documentation or even books, because with Git you can also create books, and you find a typo or there's a way to improve something, and it's very easy with forking and pull request. What about you, Andrew? Have you contributed to some stranger's repository?
Yes, I've sent some fixes to some code that was in a Git repository associated with some published papers, as well as for some code that was used in Arch Linux in their some of their utilities.
Cool. Great. So hopefully, this motivates all of you who are watching to go out, find little errors, typos, There's a specific type of label. What is the label? Easy first issue or something like that. I never remember.
Yes.
Yeah. So that you can, take a challenge and contribute to open source software. Right. Is there anything to lift up from the notes? Yeah, somebody's asking this in the general questions, will there be exercises or just lectures in the next weeks? And actually, this is the main reason of the change, because in the previous way that we did it, there were only lectures and the exercises were just demos. But now with having 2.5 hours for each episodes, we will have time for exercises, which also means that now the exercises will use Python. It doesn't mean that you need to know how to use Python, and but the goal is just to show, for example, how to run some scripts. Like for example, in the next day and next Wednesday, we will look at a tool called SnakeMake, which is a tool for pipelines, and then it will run. SnakeMake will call some Python scripts. And basically, long story short, I'm trying to tell you that we need, or you need to install Conda and the Conda environment that we have defined, because then through Conda, it takes care of all the Python dependencies that you need. And so please, before next Wednesday, if you plan to do the exercises with us here on the stream, try to have Conda on your computer. If you have troubles installing Conda, just send us an email and we can arrange even more Zoom sessions for hands-on installations. And so much asking for the requirements link and we will post it. Yeah, I would say that in general, the language agnostic, we try to be as general as possible. Then if the examples in the end are for Python and Conda, Conda is actually quite a flexible tool itself. You can manage other environments, not just Python environments. But of course, some other languages like R, for example, also have other tools for managing our environments. But I'm a bit spoiling the fun here. I'm already talking about environments without defining environments. So, let's resume this question next Wednesday. Right. So I guess we covered everything. I don't see any unanswered questions. Did I forget anything, Jarno?
I think we've covered everything. It's fine to end a bit ahead of time.
Yeah.
So people can get, well, it's Thursday, so don't quite start the weekend yet unless you have a good reason to. But
The mood is already
yeah,
towards a Friday, so.
yeah.
And it was a long day. And thank you for following
But
us and for doing all the
yeah.
exercises. So what were you saying, Jarno?
If you have any questions, just please feel free to add them in the notes, and then we can still
Yes.
answer any further questions today.
All right, so thanks again to our instructors of today, Gregor and Andrew, and thank you, Jarno, for the broadcasting and the help, and thank you everyone in those in-person rooms, managing learners, and whatever, what's the word, enthusiastic people about Git and version control. We can close this Git part of the CodeRefinery workshop, and I will see you in 6 days. Have a good weekend. Bye.